My name is Tiffany Scroggs, and I'm the Program Manager for PTAC out here in Washington State. And I am pleased to introduce today's speaker and trainer. Steve Hogan is an advisor with the New Mexico PTAC program, the Procurement Technical Assistance Center based out of Albuquerque. Previously, he was founder and president of SJH Consulting, a veteran-owned small business that provided business development and proposal services to a variety of small and medium-sized businesses. He has over 40 years of experience in information technology, financial management, project management, engineering, test, and evaluation. He's a retired colonel from the U.S. Air Force Reserve in 2006 after 30 years of military service, both active and reserve. He's a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy with a bachelor's in science and engineering. And he's active in the local Professional Aerospace Contractors Association, as well as many other groups. He's also an avid runner. And so with that, let's turn it over to our speaker today, Steve Hogan.
Thank you, Tiffany. I appreciate the introduction. And I want to say good afternoon or morning, I guess, to some of you who are still on the West Coast and further west. As she said, I am with the New Mexico PTAC. I'm happy to be able to share with you a few thoughts today on this, our second National PTAC Day. The material that I'm going to present, it's basically a variation on a presentation that I've used to give when I was working as a consultant in the past, before I came over to the New Mexico PTAC. And I'm hoping that you'll find this material is relevant. I think it will fit the demographics that I just saw, because it is kind of focused on small businesses who are trying to get that first contract. But it's also, I'm going to talk to PTAC counselors and everybody involved here. So I also want to just remind you that there's some, 300 PTAC offices around the country. Here in New Mexico, we have one major PTAC, but about 5 or 6 different locations, and that's what I'm talking about with the 300, basically serving every state. And at the end, I'll give you a link that you can use if you want to find out more about PTAC and the types of services that I'm going to be talking about, which are all available to you at no cost.
And hey, Steve, before you dive too far into it, I forgot to say 2 things. Number 1, if you have a question, use the Q&A function, and I'll be monitoring that. I might answer the question in the box, or I might interrupt Steve to answer it during his presentation, or we might hit it after the fact. And then secondly, the recording is being made right now, and we will make it available after the event today. So thanks, Steve. You're up.
Okay. So why these 3 areas, which I refer to as find it, win it, and keep it? I've worked with a number of small and large businesses over the years, so a lot of that time when I was in the Air Force Reserve, I was also working for companies when I wasn't on duty. And what I've seen here, or what I'm trying to bring together here, is material that I've seen as kind of a common business cycle for especially the small businesses that I work with, but these apply to all businesses. Business development is a big deal, and it can really consume a lot of company resources. So I think it's very important to focus it in the appropriate areas for your company. As PTAC advisors, we can assist our clients in maintaining this focus, and that'll be a lot of what I talk about today, is trying to keep things focused. Once an appropriate opportunity is identified, then the ability to prepare a compliant proposal is absolutely necessary in order to bring the work home. And again, your PTAC advisors can provide assistance with solicitation and proposal review for those companies that desire that and need it. And then finally, just winning the work isn't enough. It's only part of the battle. Companies have to realize the importance of successful performance in order to continue the business cycle. And again, we can assist you with basic guidance in this area. So how do you locate opportunities that fit? That's the first step in the process. Well, there's lots of factors that go into finding the right opportunity to bid on. As you all know, should know by now, there are a variety of sources out there, and these sources can generally present just an overwhelming amount of information to deal with in trying to find opportunities to bid on. PTAC advisors can be very helpful in narrowing down these searches to help you find those that are a good fit for the client or for you, the small business. The idea here is to help you focus in on the right business websites and the right opportunities that fit what you're trying to do. Don't give up. I've listed here just a few of the many business opportunity sites that we work with here in PTAC. Some are pretty obvious, like FedBiz Ops. I think everybody's probably heard of that, but there are others out there that are focused on various sectors of government contracting that we ought to be aware of, and I'll talk about a few of those. FAR 5.1 requires that all opportunities over $25,000 be posted on FedBiz Ops. But we want to make sure you're familiar with some of these other sites that are sometimes will contain additional details, smaller opportunities, or maybe they're needed just to submit a proposal, for example. And quite frankly, sometimes it's just easier for clients to locate opportunities on a focused, specialized site, such as some of the ones I'm going to talk about. For example, if your business is focused on just one agency, say you only want to do business with the VA or GSA, then sites like VetBiz that I have listed here, or the GSA Acquisition Gateway, these might be where you want to focus your effort. And you can just Google those words and it'll bring you right to them. Sometimes agencies require that proposals be submitted through FedConnect. I've seen that done a few times. That FedConnect is a separate site from FedBiz Ops, but it's linked to it. So if you find an opportunity that requires FedConnect, generally from FedBiz Ops, it'll link over to it. And then only certain agencies tend to use that. Department of Interior, for example, is one. Let's say your company is bidding on very specialized area, then some of these other sites might come into play. And these are really kind of reaching out there. EuroNICO, for example, that's the Navy Electronic Commerce Online European site. The Navy puts all of their European opportunities, and we have lots of naval bases in places like Italy and Spain, and all those opportunities are posted to that site, and you won't find them on FedBiz Ops directly. What else? I've got the National Reconnaissance Office, Acquisition Research Center. That's used by the intelligence community for specialized acquisitions that they do that you won't find on FedBiz Ops also. And then some others that come to mind just briefly are SBIR.gov, for example, for small business innovative research opportunities, and grants.gov if you're bidding on federal grants. Personally, I've found reason to visit all of these sites that are listed here for different clients in the past for one reason or another. In addition, though, to the federal, we also serve clients in different states, counties, parishes, and cities. All these regional entities will generally have their own unique opportunity site and bidding procedures. And as PTAC advisors, we're here to help you navigate through those and figure out how to use them. Finally, we want to remember that also there's private and commercial opportunities that exist. And this might be where some of our clients desire to focus their work, perhaps as a subcontractor to another company or something. Again, unique sites, unique bidding procedures come into play here. But what I think is a big factor at this level is networking. This should be done on multiple levels, in my opinion, in order to stay connected, whether it's, say, marketing and joining the AMA, the American Marketing Association, or if you're into doing work for the Corps of Engineers or other construction type work, you might be a member of Society for American Military Engineers. That's kind of what they focus on. Tiffany mentioned I was a member of PACA, which is the Professional Aerospace Contractors Association that's headquartered here in New Mexico. But we have events that reach out to people in literally all states. The last one, last month, I believe there was something like 38 states represented at a big Briefing for Industry event that we held here in New Mexico. But other states have similar organizations to the one we have here, and that's what you need to seek those out and make connections through those organizations. That last one is the Associated Builders and Contractors group. For those of you in construction work or construction-related industries, that's a good organization. You will find local chapters here in New Mexico. We have what's referred to as the NMABC for that purpose. As PTAC represented or PTAC advisors, we realize that all this can get very overwhelming to our clients. So we try to help you, again, focus these efforts. So to do this focusing, what I like to do is I like to start off by zeroing in on maybe a specific NAICS code or a special set of specialty keywords for some niche service that you might be looking at, or maybe just a particular market that our client is interested in. it's just so much easier to look over a list of, say, 10 or 20 opportunities every day rather than several hundred or even thousands. If you just put a general NAICS code in FedBiz Ops without narrowing things down, you're going to get way more than you ever want to read. So that's what we try to do, is help you narrow that thing down so that you can focus in on the stuff that's important to you and relevant to you. Maybe you only want to work in a specific locale or specific region due to the complexities that go with trying to branch out across the country or do work, far away in another state or somewhere else on the globe. This can also help narrow things down if you go regional with these searches. We can help you do all that. The size of the contract is something else that I think small businesses really need to be careful of. It may not be apparent when you're looking at the initial solicitation documents, but you can get in trouble quickly if you're not considering all the investments that may be needed in order to perform should you win the contract. So you got to take that into account. And this goes hand in hand with the vast sea of competitors that are out there. Basically, the larger the opportunity, the more competition you're going to see, harder it's going to be to land that contract. So I think it's good when you're starting out is to try to focus in on set-asides or small business opportunities to narrow down the field of competition. And if you're qualified for set-asides, that's a great way to get started. And then there's all these other considerations. There may be requirements in the contract that are a little more subtle, but they're very important. Things such as, say, physical security or personnel security, insurance requirements. You might need a special access to special IT systems in order to do business with the client once you land a contract. Cybersecurity is a huge deal now and growing, and this is going to be important going forward. So you got to get smart on this. It's going to be showing up. If it's not already there in most every solicitation that I'm looking at these days, I'm seeing cybersecurity. And then sometimes you'll find a requirement for key personnel that might be buried deep in the solicitation. And trust me, these things can be showstoppers if you don't read about them up front and assess your ability to meet all these requirements. You don't want to waste a lot of time and effort putting together a proposal and then not be able to perform or lose it because you didn't even have your cybersecurity squared away, things like that. So again, as PTAC advisors, we can help you think about all these different things that you need to consider. Generally, we'll do that through a solicitation review early on before you get too deep into the proposal, and or when you're just selecting opportunities to bid on. So I suspect everybody's heard the old adage, if at first you don't succeed, try again. We try to help our clients understand the reality of this business. It can take many good, sound proposal efforts before you actually land a contract. I've seen clients who bid on something different, new and different every week or every other week. That's not a good way to go. They eventually wear themselves out. They lose their ambition. They never did land a contract and eventually got to the point where their business failed. So you don't want to do that. You want to get it, again, I keep using this word, focusing your effort in the areas that you can perform, the areas you can write to, the areas you know. Again, we can help increase the odds of winning by helping you focus. Bid on things that fit your business model. Don't try to bid on everything. Respond to RFIs and sources sought notices. These are important when they come out. The government is looking for information. They're trying to find out who's out there, who's interested in what we're trying to buy. You can influence a set-aside decision sometimes just by responding to those. If you're an 8A company and they don't know you're out there, but you have the capability they're looking for, then you want to be sure to respond to that source of sought and let them know you're there. You also want to make yourselves known to the buyers through networking and have a good capability statement that you can present. Personally, I've seen win rates as good as 4 out of 5 on proposals. That's rare. And more appropriately, I've seen them as dismal as 1 in 20. So hopefully you fall somewhere in between that. 1 in 20 is hard to deal with because it's hard to just keep writing them, but it does happen. There's just many factors involved. And again, our experience as PTAC advisors can go a long way toward helping you wade through that process. So you finally found something that you really want to bid on. Now you face the real challenge, and that's developing a winning proposal. I think I might have jumped ahead a little bit. There's entire week-long or even 2-week-long courses that are dedicated just to this process of how to write a proposal. So I'm not going to try to do that today. All I hope to do here is offer some ideas that we can share with our clients, things to think about and things to consider. The proposal is generally just your one-shot opportunity to tell your story and sell your story to a government client or whatever client. But the thing is, it's got to be compliant. It's got to follow the terms of the solicitation. It has to be submitted in proper form and in proper format. And it's got to be submitted on time. You cannot afford to be late on a proposal. Generally, that will get you disqualified, or at least set to the side in case they really need it. But generally, that's a non-starter. And sometimes we find after going through all this process, there might even be a chance to further explain things like if the customer likes your initial proposal and it's compliant, then they may want to come back and ask for some considerations, some adjustments, some explanations. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. In my experience, there is no proposal template that works for every opportunity. The proposal can be fairly simple, such as those in response to, say, an RFQ, or request for quote, or a request for bid. But even these can vary in complexity, as shown in the box on the left here. But the main thing to remember is it's important to follow all instructions. The government will generally tell you exactly what they want in that response, and you want to make sure you provide it. On the other hand, on the right-hand side there is a sample response to a full-up RFP. This can become quite complex. It can involve multiple volumes. There can be a requirement for extensive detail, lots of writing. And in my opinion, the biggest fear of all is having to do oral presentations. I haven't seen that a lot lately. I've only had to do it once, but it was no fun. It took us, several days to prepare, figure out what we were going to say, who was going to say what. It involved a government panel in a big conference room. They had videographers there. They had note takers there. And it seemed to me that they just had an unending stream of questions. Don't want to scare you. That's not the norm. Occasionally these happen, but generally what you're talking about is submitting a written proposal here. Again, the important thing here is that as PTAC advisors, we're able to help our clients understand what they're facing when they take on a proposal. We don't write it for you, but we can certainly serve as a sounding board or an extra set of eyes when you're trying to decipher complicated instructions to offerers, or just when you're laying out the approach for how you're going to attack the proposal. It's sometimes difficult to get our clients to understand the timeline associated with the proposal, which is, this is only part of the overall process of trying to land a contract, but it's an important part. And I find this especially true with new businesses on their first 1 or 2 submissions. A lot of us have heard from clients who have a proposal due this week or next week, or in some cases even tomorrow, and they're wondering, how do I price it? Or what do I do about past performance? What we try to do is, out here in our New Mexico PTAC, we try to prepare our clients for this timeline well before they get involved with the solicitation. We do this through our training programs and our counseling sessions with the hope that they'll understand the timing, lay out a schedule early in the process, and then work to it. This is just a notional schedule that I put together. Top half is kind of what the customer has to go through, and the bottom half is what you as a bidder would go through. And they don't all follow this pattern, but this is just notional, as I say. Personally, I've seen 8A bids turned around in a week. Typically this time of year, near the end of the fiscal year, sometimes the government has to get things out quickly. But then I've seen, on the other hand, larger procurements that have dragged on for well over a year, and I can think of only one that actually went more than 2 years before an award decision was made. So you got to be patient.
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
Can you back up and tell us what 8A is?
Oh, 8A, of course. That would be, that's a special program for small disadvantaged businesses who, if they meet the right requirements and qualify for the program, it's an SBA program. It's a program that lasts for, I believe it's 9 years once you get into the program. And it can result in special set-asides. The government does what they call 8A set-aside contracts that only people who are qualified for that program can bid on. And sometimes you might be the only one bidding on it, in which case it might end up being a direct award, which in a direct award, forget all the things I've said, because that will be done with a very simple proposal generally. But it is one of many socioeconomic programs that are available to those who qualify. And your PTAC advisors can certainly sit down with you and go through that process and help you decide whether or not you're qualified for that program.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, Steve. We have one more question back on that other slide.
Yes.
The PPQ.
PPQs, and I'll talk about them on this slide here. I might have had it back here as well, but past performance questionnaires.
Thank you.
So that's part of the content. A typical proposal, and this would be probably an RFP response, not some of the simplified ones that are out there, will usually contain several sections somewhat similar to these. A business or contractual section. What's really important here is that we want to make sure our clients are proposal ready, as we call it, before they get started on a bid. In the not too distant past, it was possible to be working on your SAM registration, trying to get your cage code, all that stuff squared away while you were working in parallel, while you're working on the proposal. But you're doing that with the hope that it's all going to come together by award time if you win. That seems to be changing now. More and more I'm seeing that you have to be registered in SAM at the time of proposal submission. So I've only seen one get through doing it the old-fashioned way, and that was a few years ago. And I absolutely recommend you be fully registered in SAM before you ever attempt to submit a proposal. And that will also help you get your cage code in place, which is also necessary and goes on the cover page of the proposal. When it comes to past performance, and this is where the PPQs come into play, past performance questionnaires, I always tell clients to complete what they logically can on these past performance questionnaires. Basically, these get sent out to an evaluator if you have a prior contract, and they're going to grade you as to how well you did on that contract. So by helping fill it out in advance, then you're helping the evaluator by doing some of the legwork for them. It helps speed up the process and increase the likelihood that they'll actually complete it. And it may actually improve their view of your past performance because you've taken the initiative to help them out on this. But then if you're brand new to this business, you won't have past performance, and I don't want people to be discouraged by that. The lack of past performance can be overcome. Generally, sections L and M of the solicitation document will explain how to handle this situation. Or if they don't, then it's important to submit a question and ask how to deal with it. But sometimes they'll allow personal experience of key personnel in lieu of past performance, or they'll score the past performance, or the lack thereof, I should say, as a neutral. And a neutral it doesn't hurt you, but it really doesn't help you. So it's just, kind of makes it, wash it out. I have seen that happen for small businesses that were newly startup and just didn't have the past performance. Then they can still win a contract that way, though.
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
Is the past performance part of every solicitation?
Well, I'm kind of focusing in on the larger solicitations, but even on a small 8A award, I've had to at least explain one example of one project that was similar, even if it was a commercial project. A lot of construction type businesses get started in the commercial world doing a few jobs in their local area or working as a sub to someone else. They can use that as past performance to get into government contracting. So it's maybe not required on every single solicitation, but I would say the vast majority, yes.
And do you have any tips? Valerie is asking, should we not bid on contracts that require past performance? One RFQ, request for quote, stated that anything left blank is automatic non-responsive.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my computer here. Don't non-respond. Always explain things. And certainly don't let that be a reason not to bid. I think the important thing to do is just explain it. And and then try to find other things that will help. Explain your personal experience or your experience with the previous company that you worked for, or whatever you can to give some confidence. All the government's really trying to do here is minimize the risk. What they're worried about is risk of non-performance. The risk that you're not going to be able to do the job, you don't know what you're doing, or you don't have what it takes to put together a team, things like that. That's what they're looking for. So if you can convince them that you're able to do that, and write something in that past performance section, that will be to your advantage. Okay.
Very good. Thank you. I have one more past performance question.
Sure.
Is there a format to retain past performance documentation, contracts, or with orders? Is it a requirement that the contracting officer provide past performance to the company?
No, generally, the past performance questionnaires will generally be sent, if you have previous contracts, they will be sent to either the contracting officer or the contracting officer's representative on that job that you did. And they're the ones that will complete the, what I want to say, they'll complete the questionnaire portion of it. And what I'm suggesting you can fill in is just the basics, contract number, all of your contact info that they'll need, things like that, period of performance, stuff that they ask for in these. I'm sorry, what else am I missing in that question?
I think they can retype it in or provide clarification.
Yeah, so there's no requirement to keep past performance in any particular manner or anything, but what you will find in your business is very quickly, you don't want to keep reinventing the wheel. So every time you complete a contract, you want to save something to a file that explains, first of all, you want to keep all the details about the contract, and then some explanation of what you did, anything exceptional that you did, and any problems that you had and how you dealt with them. Those are the kind of things that they typically ask about.
And if I could interject, I had a client this morning that was asking me about the past performance system that Department of Defense uses. And so this particular client has no way of influencing what's in that system. You either have data in there or you don't. And so the government will go look in their back end system to check it out.
Yeah. And that's just
part of the evaluation.
That system's called Past Performance Information Retrieval System, or PEPPERS, or something like, everybody has different names for it. And that draws data from the Contract Performance Assessment Reporting System, or CPARS. But not everybody uses it, and some contractor solicitations they'll reserve the right to use the past performance information retrieval system, but they will still ask you to complete these past performance questionnaires.
Right.
So let's see what else is on here. Technical. I think it's important to understand that you don't want to assume the evaluators know who you are and what you can do or how well you do it, even if that's the case. For example, say you're bidding, you did some work and it's coming up for recompete and you're bidding on it again. You want to approach that proposal as if you're the new guy on the block trying to land it for the first time. Your past performance will be there, but you still want to write to all of the technical requirements as if they don't know you. Remember that proposals are evaluated comparatively. They compare one to the other and against the stated requirements. And it's critical for you to explain how you're going to meet those requirements and address any potential risks. Finally, when it comes to price and cost data, I can't tell you how to price your work, but we certainly can help review that if you'd like, or perhaps offer some suggestions or ideas. But the important thing here is only provide that which is requested. The more details that you provide to the government or to the buyer, the more opportunities they create for questions, changes, and negotiations that generally aren't going to work in your favor. So if all they're asking for is a lump sum, then give them the lump sum and let them come back and ask for more detail if they really need it. So I mentioned earlier that sometimes you'll get a chance to explain things. There are several different ways the government can go about this under the federal acquisition regulations. I don't know the exact citation, although I was in there last night because I have a client here who got a notice yesterday, an evaluation notice, in fact, and it was very confusing what to do with it. And we were kind of working on that together. But Evaluation notices can save your proposal from elimination by giving you a chance to clear up issues, answer any concerns, or address risks that the government might have. I have personally seen this turn a questionable proposal into a winner. In fact, in the case that I'm thinking of, all we had to do was explain how we were going to deal with a specific security matter, and within a couple days, we had a contract. So you want to answer these ENs promptly. They will send them to you. They'll ask specific questions generally. They'll give you maybe 2 pages to answer the question, and it usually doesn't take that much. But you want to turn them around within, and they'll only give you a couple days to do this. Negotiations is another fairly common type of recourse that you might run into. And that's all generally all about pricing. It may also be about staffing, which equates to pricing in a way. So again, this might be a chance to fix a problem or to just simply explain some aspect of your pricing to the buyer. It also might be the buyer's attempt to just score a better deal with you. Some contracting officers and buyers feel that that's their role in life is to take your proposal and then knock it down by 5% somehow. So look out for that. But again, this can turn a questionable proposal into a winner. But you want to be careful because it can also take you out of what's called the competitive range. If you see this as an opportunity to increase your prices or, I don't know, fix a problem, something that might have been missed, then, and I guarantee you this does happen because I've seen it happen to one company I was working with. We had a good proposal, we got into negotiations, and then we realized that we had left out some major piece of equipment. I don't know, it was in the tens of thousands of dollars. And so we slipped that in during negotiations, and it increased our pricing a little bit. And it was just enough to take us out of the competitive range, and now we were done. No more negotiations, it's all over. So you want to be real careful. You want to look at it from both sides, try to figure out what's going on, and not shoot yourself in the foot if you do get to this point of negotiations. If you get to either of these areas, you're generally in pretty good shape, because that means you're probably in the 2, 3, 4, 5 proposals that they like. And sometimes they'll get 20, 30, 50 proposals. And so if you get to this point, you're in pretty good shape. So that's all there is to proposals, right? Now the thing to do is really just have to be patient, wait out the award process. Even after negotiations, it can still take weeks or longer because they may be doing this with multiple companies. They may have to go back, reassess all the proposals after negotiations. You just never know what's going on in the background.
And hey, Steve, we have a question about from John Cochran. Says, how long does it typically take to complete a request for proposal? A range would be helpful.
Well, generally, let's look at it this way. On a significant effort, an RFP that requires multiple volumes, they will generally give you 30 days. And my experience is that this is one of these things that expands to fill the time that's available. If you have 30 days, it's probably going to take 29 of them. And you'll be doing adjustments the night before it's due and trying to get that thing submitted on time. That's kind of what I have seen over the years as to how it works. There are some people out there who have their proposals written before the RFP comes out. I always wonder how they do that. And they're ready to submit 2 days after the solicitation is announced. But I've never worked for those companies, so I can't tell you how they do that. On the short end, I mentioned earlier the 8A awards, year end, turning them in a week. Then they're only going to ask for enough information because they know what it takes to do this. These contracting officers, and they know what their timeline is. So in those cases, they will probably just send you an email, ask you to bid on it, and could you have your answer to us in 2 days? And those are not as formal, and they're generally done by email. Does that answer?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Okay. So, okay, there we go. So that takes us to what I consider the third part of this business model, if you will, and that's keeping it. Basically, not every proposal is a winner, but when you do win a contract, then managing things correctly has to be done in order to keep the work. And this really requires attention at all levels within the company and sometimes at multiple levels within the government. in order to get all the requirements met and to get started in a positive direction. So I'll talk a little bit about this. First thing, first of all, how do we help? Well, we try to remind our clients, for example, that the first thing you have to do, especially on your first award, is be sure to acknowledge it promptly. Some people like to sit on that notice for a couple of days and not show that they're too anxious, but the sooner you acknowledge it and accept the award, which is usually done by signature on the contract cover page, or maybe some other type of correspondence you receive from the contracting officer asking you to sign and say, yes, we accept this contract. Get that out of the way so you can start planning. If there's a kickoff meeting scheduled, I think it's critical that you attend it. And sometimes you have to ask for them. Some of the contracting officers just aren't concerned about it, but this is a great chance to meet all the players, both customers and incumbent employees. You can clear up any concerns or misconceptions that might exist out there, clarify requirements, and basically get the lay of the land where you're going to soon be putting your employees. And then I think an even better than a kickoff meeting is if you have a transition period. A transition period might be a week or it might be a month, usually not much more than that. But this too is a good opportunity to get things started off on the right foot. I've seen it used, for example, to reach out to the incumbent employees before making hiring decisions, a chance to meet them, because you would be in this transition period. They're still working for the previous company. You're going to take over the contract, and generally you're going to take over those employees. So this gives you a chance to meet them, see who they are before you hire them. You can learn the ins and outs of the operation by seeing what's going on, because generally the transition period requires you to have somebody on site, not a full staff or anything like that. Usually a small business will send a senior person from the company out there to see what's going on, how's it being done, somebody that can make decisions for the company. What else? Let's see. You can maybe get personnel certifications and clearances and things like that going for base access, stuff like that. And it's very important if you're bidding on the kind of work where you're going to transfer an inventory or you're going to transfer work in progress. Let's say, for example, you bid on some warehouse work and you're going to assume responsibility for that full inventory. Then the transition period is where you generally will do side by side with the previous contractor who had responsibility for it, you who are going to take it over, and generally someone from the government to verify that inventory and sign off on it, saying that both parties agree this is what it is. These are just some of the things that you might face in the initial days or weeks of a new contract. Then there's also some long-term considerations I'll touch on, and I'm just about done here. So as PTAC advisors, we probably don't have a lot of involvement with clients once you get to this point after you've landed the contract and got it started. But I still like to remind my clients, either through our training or counseling programs, about these things that they have to be cognizant of, because remember that every contract that you win becomes your future past performance, and it adds to your capability statement. So you want to do it right. There's many factors that impact the perception of how well you're doing. This slide lists several that you want to be sure to consider. For example, personnel. You got the right kind of people in place on time to get this contract rolling. The government does not like to have to do the work after the old contractor left and you've won it, but you don't have any people. So that's key. Get them in there and get them started. Make sure they have the right experience and the right training requirements, or make arrangements to get those things done quickly. And allow some time to get credentials, get them access to the facility or whatever is necessary. Absolutely know your contract requirements. Where do we have to do this work? Are there multiple locations or not? What are the shifts? What are the hours? What are the days? What are the holidays? All those kind of things come into play, and you want to make sure you understand all of that. It just makes you look smart in front of the client when you plan things out appropriately, and certainly you don't want to be caught without having somebody, at a location where they're needed on day 2 or whatever. You may have a requirement to include some of these other plans like safety, security, and quality. Sometimes those are also part of a proposal, but generally it's hard to address some of this stuff until you actually see what you're doing and they will, if they require them early in the contract, usually it'll be in the first 30 days. So you don't want to ignore that. You want to get those done, get the appropriate people dialed into those plans, who's going to be responsible for quality on site and safety on site and things like that. And then deliverables, make sure you know what's required, when it's required, who it's going to, what's the format, things like that. And these other plans right above the safety, security, and quality, those may be your initial deliverables. But then you'll also have deliverables that will be on a recurring basis, monthly reports, things like that. So make sure you understand all of that. These are the keys to good performance. You know, you can't always control everything that happens on the site or that everything that employees might do, but you can certainly understand the requirements of your contract and adhere to them. And then you want to stay in scope. Don't be out there doing work that isn't authorized by the contract or by a modification signed by a contracting officer. That's the only stuff you're going to get paid for. So if people are asking you to do this or do that as a favor, avoid that. Talk to your contracting officer representative, make sure that gets dialed into the contract if they want it done. And then probably most importantly, I think, is the need for periodic feedback and performance reviews. Again, remember, this job is your future past performance. Don't wait to the end of the first year to address issues when they're writing your CPAR evaluation. Again, CPAR, contractor performance and reporting system. It's a feedback system. You need to address issues throughout the period of performance and ensure that good evaluations are going to be written before they're ever done. And in fact, there's no harm in submitting some material to help them with these evaluations as you approach the end of your period of performance. You know, if it's a multi-year contract, they're going to do evaluations at least every year. The government will, and you can have a say in what goes into that. And, most of the time, I have seen they don't mind a little bit of input. It makes their job easier. But again, just don't forget that this contract is going to weigh heavily on how you do on future bids. So I think that kind of summarizes or wraps up what I wanted to talk. Just maybe quickly, you know, this is probably a week or two worth of material that someone could train on, condensed down to what, about 25 or 30 minutes. But I'm hoping it was useful information, at least to get you thinking about some of the things that have to be dealt with. Really, my intent here was to touch on some of the ways that PTAC advisors can assist small businesses or large businesses, whoever their clients are, in the pursuit of contract opportunities at all different levels, not just federal. Again, there's many, many nuances to this process, but the basics still remain. We want to help you find the right opportunities. We want to provide sound advice on solicitation review and how to put together a compliant proposal. And then to the extent that we're able to help you understand the basics of contract management procedures so that you are able to perform adequately once you get that contract. I've included here at the bottom of this slide the link to the Association of Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. This is our national link for those of you who might want to learn more about what we do, or maybe you don't. I saw in the opening statistics, some of you don't have a PTAC assigned yet. This would be a good place to start and find the nearest PTAC office to where you're located. And then you can take advantage of these services, which again are all free to you as a client.
Great.
That's all I have to say. So I'm going to turn it back over to our moderator for any questions.
Yeah, we got some good ones, and we have about 15 more minutes before we close out the webinar. So it's going to be quick fire and answer.
Okay.
So Vince Chris asks, do you know of any portals or websites where contractors can access federal market data? Yes.
That's one of those things that you really need to sit down with a PTAC advisor and go through. I mean, there are ways to see contracts that have already been awarded, not in detail, but the dollar amount, who got the award, who it came from. There are Federal Procurement Data System is one of those. USA Spending, I think, is another. That's award data. There are also sites out there, and some of the ones that I mentioned, for example, that GSA acquisition site that I had on one of the slides, actually has a forecast of opportunities. The VA puts out forecasts of opportunities. A lot of the DOD, OSDBU, Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization will put out forecasts So yes, there are lots of portals out there, but you really need to kind of focus it in again to exactly what you're looking for.
And I'm typing into the question box, usaspending.gov, agency-specific forecast, fbo.gov for award data, and many others. So if those went by really fast and you didn't type them down, check out the Q&A, and I should have answered that so that everyone can see the answer. Thank
Great.
you. Sophia has two questions. One, if there's an insurance and bond requirement for the bid that we may have or not have enough of at the moment, could we state that we're ready and willing to get additional coverage upon winning the bid? Is it normal for contractors to do this, or will they be denied because of it?
Good question. I think the expectation is that you are already able to get a bid bond at the level that's requested. One way to potentially deal with this would be to talk to the agent that you work with for your bonding company and see if they will provide a letter, because a lot of times the government will ask for a letter that states what your limits are. And if they know you're bidding on a contract and you share some information with them about that and your ability to do it, they may go ahead and help you out there. That's the only thing I have seen done. The other option is to find a sub or a partner, I should say, who is able to bond at a higher level and work your way into it that way.
Great, thank you. Next question, some of the invitation for bids don't state the budget for the project. How can we find out the scope of work and how much is being paid?
Yeah, a lot of them don't have that. Construction bids will generally, there is a FAR requirement to state a range of values, like this is going to be between 250 and 500,000 or something like that. Pretty broad ranges though. But a lot of service type contracts will not do that. Quite honestly, I've never seen them do that. The way that I have done this in the past is go to, first of all, we would ask the question right off the bat, who is the incumbent contractor and what's their contract number? If you can get those two pieces of information, then you can go to FPDS and look that contract up and see how much money was initially awarded. You can see all the mods that were done on that contract. And if you sit there and study this a little bit and maybe talk to your PTAC advisor, there's ways to kind of sort that data out and figure out what's going on. You can kind of see when they exercised a 12-month option. And from those pieces of information, then it's up to you to kind of backtrack into it. If it's a contract that is under the Service Contract Act, then you can easily look up what those minimum pay requirements were and the benefit requirements were, and you can kind of piece this all together that way. But it's never exact, and they're never going to give you that data exactly.
Great, and I'm typing in there, you mentioned an acronym, Federal Procurement Data System, FPDS.
FPDS, yes.
And I'm typing that in there so people can have the link. And very good, thank you. Next question. What are your thoughts about following up on a submitted request for proposal? For example, email, is that a good idea? If so, what time frame from when the RFP is submitted? This is from Florence Gerber.
So what I have done as a PTAC advisor, I've got clients who have submitted proposals. They seemingly go into a black hole. They don't know what's going on. They come back to me and I reach out to someone in that organization to try to find out what's going on, because I'm not directly involved in the sense that I don't have a proposal in the party. Sometimes they'll talk to us, sometimes they won't. Generally, you can also send an email, and I've done that as a contractor. Just send an email to them and ask them if you could please give us an update on the status of the solicitation or the evaluation. They probably 50-50 chance on getting any information that way.
Great. Yeah, you don't want to be too aggressive and annoy your customers, but at the end of the day, a check-in, a polite check-in is usually
yeah. And I would do that by email rather than call them and put them on the spot over the phone.
Yep, exactly. They buy a lot of things every day and they might not remember what you're talking about. Rich asks, what's a good rule of thumb on how to deal with protests? I don't know which angle Rich is asking, if he's on the government side dealing with protests or not. Maybe he can clarify there, but either way, or maybe he tried to win and got protested or something like that.
Yeah, that's a lot of possibilities there. I've not had much experience dealing with protests at all. I the companies that I've worked with generally felt like it wasn't worth going through that process. Let's live and learn and move on to the next opportunity. Partly because it can tie up a lot of resources. It can tie you up legally if you have to, hire lawyers to help you with that. It's got to all be done a certain way, certain timelines, things like that. So generally, I would say try to avoid them if at all possible. And I realize that's not always the case. Sometimes it's cut and dried. You just feel like you really got hosed on a bid, and you want to deal with it. In which case, then I really can't offer you much advice there, but I would start with a lawyer who is experienced doing protests.
And on the protest topic, Tim asks, suppose an RFP states that cost is the most important factor and you propose a price cheaper than your competitor, yet they still win. Despite having the grounds for a protest, at what point does a protest become a waste of time and money? Should you just move on to the next RFP? Well,
I like that last option personally because it does start consuming time and money. When you do pursue a protest. And even though you might think, and I've seen these where I was absolutely certain that we bid it properly, and then they gave it to somebody else who obviously didn't read the whole solicitation, or they bid people that weren't at the appropriate level, lots of things. And you never know what's going on in the background. So I just think you need to, tread with caution when you start talking about doing protests. That's my personal opinion, though, based on the experience that I've had. I just have not seen anyone really get anywhere by going through that process.
And I will add to that a debrief, if you're entitled to one, is a great option to learn a little bit more. I had a client recently just raring to protest, and she thought for sure she was low bid and was responsive. Turns out her pricing was 18% more than her competitor, and she didn't find that out until the debrief. So maybe Tim, you're asking in a post debrief situation, but for those of you on the call that haven't done a debrief and are entitled to one, always get your debrief.
Absolutely. You can learn a lot from a debrief that you can use on your next proposal.
Exactly. Very good. Thank you. Okay, we got a few more minutes here. Does PTAC help with 8A certification?
Yes. That
was easy. Do I need to submit when the agency is requesting a discretionary order below $50,000? Oh, what does Dorado need to submit when it's $50,000? Ooh, I don't know.
I'm not sure I know how to answer that one.
Yep. Okay, we're going to skip that one and talk to your local PTAC person, and they will look at the solicitation specifically or the request for quote specifically and let you know what all you need to submit. The training and the PowerPoint will be available. I have a lot of questions. And at what point do you ask about progress payments? A question from Nate Lofton.
If progress payments are appropriate, it should be stated somewhere in the solicitation and the contract. I would not wait until after you have a contract signed to start asking those kind of questions. I would try to find that sort of thing out up front. There are FAR clauses that address it. If those FAR clauses aren't included in the solicitation, then there's generally a Q&A period early on. Another good reason to look the solicitation over carefully as soon as it comes out, if you're responding in that manner, and formulate those questions and get them into the buyer of the CO.
Very good. Lori's asking where I might find a seminar or class on proposal preparation. And I'll chime in first that your local PTAC might be offering that. A lot of times that's done one-on-one as well, though, depending on your industry or something like that. But Steve, what do you do in your center there?
Same thing. We here in New Mexico, we have what we call our 5-part series, which is a training program that we offer periodically throughout the year. It includes solicitation review, proposal development, labor law, pricing and estimating, and contract management. Those are the 5 parts. And we break that out over the course of 3 weeks. Each piece of it is 1 day. So we only have you 1 day for 3 weeks in a row to cover it all. I don't know if I explained that right. And we also do one-on-ones when the situation warrants it, because we don't always, somebody might need help and it's, 2 months away before our next class. So we'll definitely do that one-on-one.
Very good, thank you. What's the best way to market your certifications? For example, HubZone certification.
Well, first and foremost, I think you want to make sure that you have your certifications on your business cards and on your capability statement. And then beyond that, you need to show up at events. I once went to a seminar, and the whole key of this whole week was show up. If you don't show up at things, you don't go out there and network, and you don't go to industry days and briefings for industry and SAMI meetings or whatever, luncheons, things like that, that's the place to get that word out. But also put it on your collateral material that you're going to be handing out at those events.
Yeah, and so I will, that's a great, we mentioned capability statements just now, Steve, and that's not something that we were able to address here today. I know I'm doing another webinar later today that everyone's invited to. It's 3:30 Pacific time on capability statements and marketing your firm. You're more than welcome to join, and I will have a recording of that later. So if you're interested, go ahead and ping me on the Q&A and I'll give you the details. What's the difference between a cage and a NAICS code?
NAICS code describes the type of work you do. It's, I'm going to try to get this out right, North American Industrial Classification System, whereas a cage code is a contract and government entity code. And every company trying to do business with the government has to have a cage code. It's an identification code, similar to a DUNS, but it's different in the sense that it's also, all the government agencies also have cage codes. NAICS code, though, strictly has to do with what kind of services or products you're offering.
Very good, thank you. So I am seeing, I think we have time for one more good question, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to get to them all, but Valerie is asking, don't they sometimes take a slightly higher bid if it's to meet a specific group that they need to meet allocation needs for next year, like for veteran-owned, women-owned, etc.?
Well, the same basic rules still apply. If they really have to meet an allocation goal or a socioeconomic goal, then the way they'll do that is to do a set-aside so that only people who are in that group can bid. Therefore, they assure themselves of getting a veteran-owned business as the winner. Whether or not they'll take a slightly greater price over another, I can't answer that one. That would not be right.
Great, and that's what I'm typing in here. They, with the exception of HubZone full and open. If you're a HubZone firm and you're bidding on full and open, there is a price preference allowed for in the law. Great, very good. Well, I am so appreciative of Steve stepping up. It is a little nerve-wracking to have about 200 people on a webinar when he's all alone in his office. And so you have been a great audience with some fantastic questions. I hope we hit it home that your local PTAC is there, is there ready to support you, and they have unique information that's unique to your locality. So I know it's going to be tempting to everyone reach out to Steve because he's smart and just gave a great training, but Steve is on the hook to just serve the New Mexico businesses. So contact your local PTAC in your region and they would be delighted to work with you. Know that our services are offered at no cost. We're funded by the Department of Defense Logistics Agency to provide this service. So reach out to us, let us help you, and we look forward to working with you. Any last words, Steve?
No, I just appreciate everybody's attention, and I hope this was beneficial to you. Thanks.
Very good, thank you. And I will stay on a little bit longer and answer some of the Q&A via typing, but for now, let's log off. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, thank you.